Welcome to the Timeless Talents channel. In today's video, we're exploring the fascinating world of real-life siblings in Hollywood. Get ready to see some incredible brother and sister duos. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. A huge thank you to all our subscribers for your amazing support. Let's dive in. Tia Mowry, 47 years old, and Tamara Mowry, 47 years old. James Franco, 47 years old, and Dave Franco, 40 years old. Paul Walker passed away in 2013 at the age of 40, and Cody Walker, 37 years old. Harrison Ford, 83 years old, and Terrence Ford, 80 years old. Sylvester Stallone, 79 years old, and Frank Stallone, 75 years old. Stephen Amell, 44 years old, and Robbie Amell, 37 years old. Kiefer Sutherland, 58 years old, and Rossif Sutherland, 46 years old. Chris Hemsworth, 42 years old, and Liam Hemsworth, 35 years old. Owen Wilson, 56 years old, and Luke Wilson, 53 years old. Emily Deschanel, 48 years old, and Zooey Deschanel, 45 years old. Damon Wayans, 64 years old, and Keenan Ivory Wayans, 67 years old. Joaquin Phoenix, 50 years old, and River Phoenix passed away in 1993 at the age of 23. Emily Blunt, 42 years old, and Felicity Blunt, 45 years old. Eddie Murphy, 64 years old, and Charlie Murphy passed away in 2017 at the age of 57. Hilary Duff, 37 years old, and Haley Duff, 40 years old. Florence Pugh, 29 years old, and Toby Sebastian, 33 years old. Vanessa Hudgens, 36 years old, and Stella Hudgens, 29 years old. Shirley MacLaine, 91 years old, and Warren Beatty, 88 years old. Joan Cusack, 62 years old, and John Cusack, 59 years old. Donnie Wahlberg, 55 years old, and Mark Wahlberg, 54 years old. Pedro Pascal, 50 years old, and Lux Pascal, 33 years old. Johnny Depp, 62 years old, and Daniel Depp, 71 years old. Joe Russo, 54 years old, and Anthony Russo, 55 years old. Tom Hanks, 69 years old, and Jim Hanks, 64 years old. Dakota Johnson, 35 years old, and Jesse Johnson, 42 years old. Emilio Estevez, 63 years old, and Charlie Sheen, 59 years old. Brie Larson, 35 years old, and Melaine Desaulniers, 36 years old. Chris Evans, 44 years old, and Scott Evans, 41 years old. Sean Wayans, 54 years old, and Marlon Wayans, 53 years old. Rooney Mara, 40 years old, and Kate Mara, 42 years old. Ben Affleck, 52 years old, and Casey Affleck, 50 years old. Jake Gyllenhaal, 44 years old, and Maggie Gyllenhaal, 47 years old. Jason Bateman, 56 years old, and Justin Baterman, 59 years old. Hilary Duff, 37 years old, and Haley Duff, 40 years old. William Baldwin, 62 years old, and Alec Baldwin, 67 years old. Beau Bridges, 83 years old, and Jeff Bridges, 75 years old. Matt Dillon, 61 years old, and Kevin Dillon, 59 years old. Julia Roberts, 57 years old, and Eric Roberts, 69 years old. Elle Fanning, 27 years old, and Dakota Fanning, 31 years old. Macaulay Culkin, 44 years old, and Kieran Culkin, 42 years old. Blake Lively, 37 years old, and Eric Lively, 44 years old. Chris Rock, 60 years old, and Tony Rock, 51 years old. Angelina Jolie, 50 years old, and James Haven, 52 years old. Woody Harrelson, 64 years old, and Brett Harrelson, 62 years old. Bill Skarsgård, 35 years old, and Gustav Skarsgård, 44 years old. Bill Murray, 74 years old, and Joel Murray, 62 years old. Al Pacino, 85 years old, and Roberto Pacino, 79 years old. Chris Tucker, 53 years old, and Dexter Tucker, 45 years old.